He didn't just shove me. He did it in front of everyone, his associates, our neighbors, and even the newly hired project coordinator from his firm who had absolutely no business at our grand launch party. One moment, I was circulating with platters of hors d'oeuvres, trying to quell the rising dread in my chest. The next, I was sprawled on the polished concrete floor, my heels askew, guests frozen in a tableau of shock. He stood over me, a crystal goblet in hand, a triumphant smirk plastered across his face. "She's too dramatic," he muttered, loud enough for the stunned crowd to hear. "Now you all see what I put up with daily." A ripple of nervous laughter spread through some of the attendees, not all, but enough to twist the knife. I lay there, utterly humiliated, bruised both physically and emotionally. Every shred of dignity I had painstakingly clung to during our 5 years of marriage felt ripped away. And Damien, the man I had married and helped build a flourishing tech enterprise with, didn't even flinch as I struggled to my feet. That was the moment I knew the man I loved was long gone. The monster who had replaced him. I was going to dismantle him. Silently. Legally. Completely. The roots of deception. I met Damien in the bustling, art-filled alleys of Viridian Square. He was charismatic, articulate, and utterly penniless. I was managing my uncle's burgeoning e-commerce platform, and he was attempting to launch a small gaming blog with a battered laptop. What I didn't comprehend then was that I was his stepping stone, not a partner, not a lover, a ladder. We dated for a whirlwind 8 months before he proposed. Back then, I believed it was romantic. My friends called him opportunistic. I called him driven. I had recently inherited 7 million Nigerian nairas from my late grandmother, which I promptly invested to co-found his digital dream. Within 2 years, he was generating income. Not a fortune, but sufficient to afford designer clothes, a penthouse apartment, and a luxury vehicle. He hired staff, garnered industry recognition. I continued to oversee our finances until he declared we needed to divide roles. "I'll manage the business accounts," he stated smoothly. "You just focus on being my muse." My muse. But gradually, I became invisible in my own home. His business meetings morphed into lavish parties. His co-workers transformed into flirtatious women who appeared at peculiar hours. I discovered unfamiliar strands of hair on our pillows. Perfumes that weren't mine. Lipstick stains on his shirts that certainly weren't mine. And each time I confronted him, he gaslit me. "Are you accusing me? You're paranoid. You don't trust me because you're insecure." So I receded. I shrank so he could shine. The public betrayal. Until that night. We were hosting a lavish promotion celebration. Damien had just secured a lucrative partnership deal with a major West African tech conglomerate. He invited all his friends, colleagues, and even a few potential investors. I wasn't even aware the guest list exceeded 80 people. I hadn't known the party was happening until 48 hours prior. But I remained silent. I ordered gourmet catering, meticulously cleaned, arranged the grand hall, and donned my finest gown. As I circulated with a tray of sparkling wine, I overheard him laughing with his inner circle. One of them, a sharp-featured man in a tailored silk suit, remarked something about me being too conventional. Damien merely shrugged. "She's from a different background, but she's learning her place." That single sentence shattered the last vestiges of my inner peace. I turned to walk away, but the heel of my shoe snagged on the antique rug. I stumbled, and he reached out. Not to assist me, but to shove hard. I fell, and he laughed. The party resumed. Music swelled. But something profound within me died. I ascended the grand staircase, locked the bedroom door, and wept on the cold marble bathroom floor. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. But I did one crucial thing. I opened my old files, business licenses, bank statements, the property deed, even his power of attorney. I realized something that almost made me smile. The mansion we resided in was still registered in my name. His supposed empire was co-signed under the startup I had initially registered. His luxury car was financed through my late grandmother's trust account. He was strutting around with borrowed power, and I was about to pull the plug. The next morning, he offered no apology. Instead, he tossed his car keys onto the table and demanded why I had embarrassed him in front of his friends. That's when I smiled. "I embarrassed you," I said softly. "Damien, you haven't seen anything yet." He chuckled, convinced I was bluffing. "You can't do anything. You're just the wife." "No," I said, rising to my full height. "I'm the owner." He froze, but only for a fleeting moment. Then he dismissed me with a wave and strode out. That's when I made my first call, to the bank, to freeze our joint accounts and revoke his signatory rights on the business account. By noon, his card was declined at a petrol station. By 2 p.m., the electricity company sent a notice for unpaid bills, ones he was supposed to settle from the business account. By 5 p.m., he was calling me incessantly, but I let it ring. Instead, I called the locksmith. By nightfall, the locks were changed. The house security code reset. The gate remotes reprogrammed. Damien had no clue. He returned home at 11:42 p.m., tipsy, fuming, banging on the gate like a madman. "Open up, Elara. I live here." But I simply stood by the curtain, lights off, smiling quietly. Because in the dark, something felt new. Something felt powerful. That night, I didn't just lock the door. I locked the chapter. And the war had only just begun. Reclaiming my power. Damien slept in his car that night, and I watched him through the upstairs window like a silent specter in my own narrative. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stood there, arms folded, until his headlights dimmed and his rage dissolved into confusion. He paced for almost an hour, banging on the gate, shouting into the intercom, cursing me as if I were his mortal enemy. But the true adversary was his own colossal arrogance. At 3 a.m., I finally went to bed, not because I was tired, but because I knew the game had commenced and I held every winning card. By sunrise, he was gone. I assumed he had driven off to his friend Leo's place. The same Leo who had laughed when I fell. The same Leo who once told Damien, "If she starts acting difficult, there are plenty of younger girls who'd love to be with a man like you." Good. Let him become their problem now. I dressed impeccably that morning. Not for him, not for show, but for me. I wore the same pristine white power suit I had worn the day I first registered my company 5 years ago, the day I stepped out of my uncle's shadow and into my own story. Then I drove to the bank. "Good morning, Madame Elara," the manager greeted, his eyes wide. "We received your instructions to freeze both business and personal joint accounts." "Yes," I replied. "And I need full withdrawal access transferred solely to me, effective today." He hesitated. I handed him the stack of documents, my grandmother's trust authorization, the incorporation certificate, the will, the business startup contract. Every paper that proved I wasn't just the co-founder. I was the one who had funded everything. And that included the account he had been squandering on hotel suites and exclusive club nights. The manager reviewed the documents for 10 minutes. "It's done," he confirmed. "You are now the sole signatory." I nodded. No smile, no overt joy. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. The domino effect. That afternoon, I visited our main business office in Azure City Center. Damien hadn't shown up. No one had seen him since the weekend party. Some staff whispered. One even quietly asked, "Madam, are you all right? We heard he kicked you." I looked at her for a moment and said, "He kicked me in front of all of you. And now, I'm kicking him out." Silently. She nodded. "We stand with you, Ma." By 3 p.m., I had issued new directives. All company decisions would now go through me. All access cards linked to Damien's name were revoked. I appointed my cousin, Zara, as the interim operations manager. Damien received a company-wide email later that evening. Following internal restructuring, Mr. Damien Vance is suspended pending investigation into financial mismanagement. He called me 17 times, and I let it ring. Then he sent desperate voice notes. This is madness, Elara. You're ruining me. You're being emotional. Just open the gate and let's talk. You think freezing my accounts and changing locks makes you powerful? I made you. That last one made me laugh out loud. He made me. The man who had nothing but vague dreams when I met him. No, sir. I was the soil, the sun, and the seed. He merely stood in my shade. But the day wasn't over. At 6 p.m., he returned. This time, with 2 local constables. Yes, you read that right. Police. He came to our house claiming I had unlawfully locked him out and seized his property. I watched them from the upstairs balcony as they knocked. Madam, please come out. This man says he's the legal owner of this house. I descended slowly, papers in hand, calm, graceful. Officers, I said politely. Do you have a warrant? No, one replied. This man, I said firmly, indicating Damien, this house is in my name. I have the certificate of occupancy. I have the deed. I built this with my inheritance. I handed them copies. And this man, I continued, rolling up my sleeve to reveal the fading bruises on my arm, has no tenancy agreement, no ownership, and as you can see, he assaulted me 2 nights ago. Their eyes shifted. One officer turned to Damien and asked, Sir, do you have documentation? Damien stammered. The officer sighed. Sir, if the madam has the papers, you have no case. This is a domestic matter. Pursue it in court if you disagree. They left. Damien stared at me as if seeing me for the very first time. I made one mistake, he spat. No, I said softly, closing the gate. You made 1,000. And I remembered every single one. The unraveling. That night, I received a call from Zara. Auntie, she whispered. You need to see this. She sent a screenshot. Damien had created a burner social media account. He posted pictures of me with captions like, this woman used dark magic to take over my company. She's a fraud. She's lying to everyone. She's unstable. If anything happens to me, blame her. He was unraveling publicly. Good. Let him scream in the dark, because I had light and receipts. But I underestimated one thing, how far a wounded man could go when he realizes you no longer fear him. The next day, Damien showed up at my office. Not at the gate, inside. He had somehow convinced one of the junior staff to let him in. He stormed into my private office like a wild animal, sweating, disheveled, red-eyed. You think you've won? He shouted. I stood. Zara, I called. Before he could lunge, 2 security guards calmly dragged him out. I followed behind, my heels clicking sharply against the marble, head held high. Damien Vance, I announced in front of all my staff. You are now trespassing. If you return here again, I will file a restraining order. He shouted something vulgar as they forced him out. But I didn't flinch. I looked at my staff. I apologize, I said calmly. This won't happen again. And I meant it. Because that evening, I made another call to the authorities to finally file a restraining order, and something else too. I called a lawyer. Is there a way, I asked, to remove his name permanently from our business? I want him legally, entirely erased. The lawyer paused, then uttered the words that made my lips twitch into a faint smile. Yes. And we can start immediately. The courtroom showdown. The very next morning, my neighbor, Aisha, knocked on my door with a raised brow and an expression that screamed she had already heard the latest gossip. "I heard you were crying outside last night. That man, he kicked you in front of everyone?" she asked gently, handing me a small flask of calming herbal tea as if bestowing dignity itself. "Girl, I'd have slapped the devil out of him." I smiled weakly, accepting the tea. "Yeah, he really did." She sat beside me on my plush sofa. "What are you going to do?" And that was the question that had haunted me all night. What was I going to do? I didn't have much left, but I still had my pride. And my name wasn't going to be Mrs. Walk All Over Me anymore. Aisha took one look at me and said, "If you need help packing his bags, I'm your girl." But I wasn't going to pack anything. I wasn't going to scream or cry anymore. I was going to handle this smartly. That's when I remembered the bank account. Back when things were sweet between us, I had helped Damien set up his business account. He needed someone trustworthy, and who better than his loyal wife? My name was on the business documentation. Legally, he never bothered to change it because he didn't expect me to ever have a backbone. I pulled out the paperwork from a forgotten box beneath my bed. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages, and there it was, my name right next to his, listed as a co-owner of the account. Damien had been raking in money from the logistics company we started together, but the funds were in our name. He must have forgotten. Or perhaps he thought I'd forgotten who I was. Well, I hadn't. I made my way to the bank. The banker glanced up at me with a professional smile. "How can we help you today?" "I want to freeze all withdrawals from this account," I said, sliding the documents across the table. "Are you the primary or secondary account holder?" "I'm both. We're co-owners." He scanned the files. His eyebrows rose. "You're right." Within 30 minutes, I had frozen the account. Damien wouldn't be buying his mistress another designer watch or paying for champagne brunches with our money again. It was petty, and it was perfect. The revelation. Later that evening, I sat in my car, parked across from the mansion we used to share. His friends were outside again, this time drinking and dancing. I recognized the loud music and even louder laughter. I watched as Damien walked out with another woman on his arm, someone new, not even the same mistress from before. This man was moving through women like he moved through money, carelessly. I stared at him from behind the wheel, unseen, unbothered, cold. He was laughing as if he had everything under control. But I was the one who had just cut the tap. The next day, the first explosion occurred. I woke up to 12 missed calls from Damien. The first voicemail was calm, "Babe, I think there's an issue with the bank account. Can you check?" The second was tense, "Hey, I don't know what you did, but I can't access anything. Fix it now." The third, "You're playing with fire, woman. You think you can embarrass me and touch my money?" I smirked. It was never his alone. I built that company. I ran those early logistics schedules. I dealt with vendors, angry clients, and even applied for the startup grant that got us going. But he thought he could erase me and still eat from my hand. I had only just begun. Damien showed up at my apartment around 3 p.m. His shirt was wrinkled, and his face was flushed with rage. "You locked the account," he barked as soon as I opened the door. I didn't flinch. "Yes, I did." "You crazy. That's my business, my livelihood." "Our business," I corrected. "And if you're going to beat me in public, you better get used to earning in private." He shoved the door frame with his palm. "You want to fight dirty?" I tilted my head. "No, I want to fight smart." He looked like he wanted to lunge at me, but for the first time, he saw that I wasn't scared. The thing about being kicked is once you hit the ground, you either stay down, or you rise up, angry. He stormed off, and that's when I started the second phase of my plan, changing the locks. The Locked Kingdom. I called a locksmith from across town, someone who didn't know Damien or his cronies. He arrived by sunset. "You sure about this?" the man asked. I nodded. "Change them all, and install one of those fingerprint locks too. I don't want a single key opening that house except mine." Because I was done being the woman who begged to be respected. Now, I was the woman who delivered silent consequences. 2 nights later, I sat inside the mansion again, alone. It smelled like jasmine and justice, the scent of a woman who had reclaimed her space. Damien hadn't tried to return. I was sure he thought I wouldn't go that far. But the moment he did, he would find his key didn't work, and his account was empty, because guess what? I also moved my half of the funds to a separate savings account, legally, carefully, quietly. That night, I danced barefoot on the cold tile in my satin robe, sipping tea, my playlist on full blast, until I saw headlights sweep across the living room. He was back. He stepped out of his car, walked up to the front door, and tried the key. It jammed. He tried again. Nothing. I watched through the peephole as he pounded his fist on the door. "Open this damn door, woman. You think you can lock me out of my house?" I didn't answer. I watched him rage, then retreat to his car, calling someone on the phone. Then I turned off the lights and waited, because I knew the real storm hadn't even begun yet. I didn't open the door. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I simply watched him beat his fist against the wood like a madman locked out of his own kingdom. Only this time, the queen had taken the crown, the keys, and the kingdom too. He kicked the door again. "Open up. You think you're smart. You forget who you married." No, I didn't forget. I remembered everything. Every insult, every laugh shared with his friends at my expense. Every time he called me useless when I had built the damn company from scratch. I had remembered too much, and he had remembered too little. I stepped away from the door and let him scream himself hoarse. I was not the same woman who used to cry in the bathroom after his outbursts. That woman was gone. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a new alert. Damien had tried to open another account using company funds, but the bank blocked the attempt because I had flagged the business name. And as co-owner, I had every right. I knew it would only be a matter of time before he retaliated in a way that wasn't just yelling. So, I called my lawyer. Her name was Amaka, and she was as fierce as they came. "You did good freezing the accounts," she said after reviewing everything. "Now we prepare for the legal blowback. And if he tries to force his way back into the property, well, we'll make sure that ends in court." "And what about the house?" I asked. "He says it's his." She leaned forward on the video call. "Do you have the original title documents?" I nodded. It was deeded in my name. He had insisted I be the one to sign at the time because my credit score was better. He just never thought I'd remember that. She chuckled. "Then he has no legal footing. Let him try to walk into a courtroom with that nonsense." The final gambit. That night, Damien returned. This time, he didn't knock. He stood outside the gate, pacing back and forth, yelling into his phone. I watched from upstairs, lights off, heart thumping but calm. He had one hand on his waist, his phone pressed against his ear, his eyes scanning the windows like a predator. His voice pierced the silence. "Do you know what she did to me? Froze my money. Changed my locks. She thinks she's the boss now. This is my house, my street. I made her." "No, Damien. You used me. You humiliated me. And now I was making sure you never did it again." Suddenly, I heard a bang at the gate. Then another. Then another. It wasn't just yelling this time. He was trying to break in. I picked up my phone and dialed the local emergency number. "Ma'am, do you feel in danger?" the dispatcher asked. "Yes," I replied. My ex-husband is trying to break into my home. Is he armed? I looked down. He wasn't holding anything, just his fists and rage. Not visibly, but I need help. Within 10 minutes, 2 officers arrived. They pulled him aside. I watched through the curtains as he tried to explain, waving his arms, pointing at the house, shouting something about ownership. But when they asked for proof, he had none. Your name's not on the title, one officer asked. It doesn't matter, he screamed. It does in the state of Viridian, sir, the officer replied. You have no right to be here. They handed him a citation for harassment and trespassing and told him to leave the premises. And then it happened. The moment that changed the tone of everything. As he got into his car to drive off, the new woman, the same one he'd brought to the barbecue the day he kicked me, stepped out of the passenger seat. She didn't say anything. She just looked up at the house, then at me standing behind the curtain, and she smiled. Not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile women give each other when they think they've won. I pulled the curtain shut. She didn't know what was coming, because my plan was never just to get revenge. My plan was to dismantle his entire facade, legally, financially, and publicly. And I had just begun.